It would seem that Eren Yeager has had his mind set since childhood on his attainment of freedom, which is initially showcased in an interaction with Hannes regarding the lack of need for humanity to venture past the walls. Although not content with Hannes and his squad's cynicism and dismissal of the Survey Corps' mission, he concedes that if humanity were to continue to be barricaded by the walls without ever venturing outside, then all will indeed be well. They will continue to survive. However, he attributes this way of living to that of a caged animal. At the very least, we can safely assume that Eren is not preoccupied with the practicality of venturing out to foreign lands infested with titans and the immense danger that it warrants, but rather, he is more concerned about not being restricted to a sedentary life. Why? Well, it could be due to his nature, his environment, or most possibly a combination of both aspects. A core aspect of Eren's surrounding environment encompasses the restriction brought on by the three concentric walls enclosing humanity within, and the escape that the military-based branch, the Survey Corps, presented to him as a means to break away from this restriction. For instance, in anticipation of the arrival of the Survey Corps from one of their many expeditions, Eren and Mikasa venture to witness their return early on in the story. However, they return yielding no significant breakthroughs or results, if any, and arrive with disturbingly heavy losses. Eren is visibly shaken by the situation presented before him, but is undeterred by this. Upon his return home, he is put on the spot regarding his aspirations of joining the Survey Corps, which his mother sternly opposes. Although Eren seems to understand the existential threat and ramifications of joining the Survey Corps, he nonetheless argues his points across adamantly. His father then poses a simple question: why go outside? Eren responds to him on two grounds, which are important to note. His primary justification is in reference to his personal and individualistic dissatisfaction of being enclosed within the walls, without ever being aware of what is actually occurring beyond them. His secondary justification focuses on the collective. As he states, everyone who died up to now will have died in vain. It is critical to underline that Eren's first justification is centered around his personal aspirations as a child, the immense loss of life, the dredging guilt and inner conflict the Survey Corps must shoulder as a consequence of their treacherous expeditions beyond the walls, and the justifications the members of this military-based branch attempt to formulate in order to reconcile and rationalize the sacrifices required to reach each and every painful milestone in the ultimate goal of freedom in whatever capacity have been recurring themes linked and echoed most notably by Erwin Smith, Levi Ackerman, among others throughout the story. To contextualize and analyze the aforementioned themes further, specifically highlighting the divergence between collective and personal objectives, one may argue that Erwin, Levi, and Eren maintained opposing perspectives in regards to their overarching concept of freedom and the past they have ultimately foregone. But one shared aspect they all retained is to give meaning to their dead comrades in some shape or form, which I assert to be an honest attempt at atonement and redemption on their part. Regardless of their motives, comparing these three characters' intrinsic ideologies centered on the concept of freedom should allow us to flesh out the thematic significance and undertones of the tumultuous conflict between the individual and the collective as presented throughout the narrative. For example, Erwin was torn and undecided between his personal dream and his mandated duty as the commander to fulfill the mission of the Survey Corps. He was haunted by the guilt of sending countless soldiers to their deaths to advance the end goal of the Survey Corps, but was also obsessed with his father's theory. Psychologically speaking, his obsession with his father's dream is arguably intertwined with his perceived culpability of him contributing directly to his deaths. Perhaps he wanted to verify the theory as some form of atonement. Nevertheless, Erwin's personal freedom took root in the form of the pursuit of truth. Did humans perhaps exist beyond the walls after all? Are we being lied to by the powers that be? The confirmation of this theory was his greatest motivating factor, which kept him pushing on and persevering no matter the odds, allowing him to withstand all the anguish he went through in order to satisfy his relentless inquiry and to honor his father's untimely loss of life. In fact, he states that it was his life's mission at one point to prove his father's theory. However, he also functioned as the commander of the Survey Corps, I dare say that Erwin reached this high-ranking position primarily to pursue his own dream and secondarily to achieve the collective goal of the Servicorps, but somewhere along the line, he perhaps suppressed his personal dream, possibly out of shame and guilt, as he may have viewed his drive to be misguided and inappropriate, a motive too individualistic, incompatible with the Servicorps' ideals and its overall mission. Once Erwin and Levi learn about the Servicorps' findings regarding the nature of the Titans and the horror the truth entailed, that Titans are humans after all, we visibly see Erwin delighted to hear this revelation. Without the context I just elaborated upon earlier, it is relatively easy to understand why Levi was so disturbed as to why Erwin would express himself like this. His dream, his obsession once again resurfaced due to seemingly concrete evidence materializing to back his admittedly convoluted theory, effectively dulling the guilt he carried and eroding his responsibilities as the commander, overpowering his sensibilities momentarily or perhaps continuously henceforth. Even during his very last moments, we witness Erwin reenacting what started his struggle, a simple question, an inquiry driven by innocent curiosity. As we are aware, Erwin's mission as the commander was to secure humanity's survival. However, he was beginning to waver between his dream and his duty. Cognizant of the immense sacrifices he justified to progress the objectives of the Servicorps, he ultimately attempted to anchor himself in his misdeeds, his guilt, but even then, his dream ate at him. At the very crux of the turning point which ensued during the eventful battle to retake Shiganshina, Erwin was at a complete loss as to which direction to take, that of individualism or the collective. As the odds seemed not to be in the favor of the Servicorps during that battle, potentially having the entire faction eliminated, he considered abandoning his duty to pursue his individualistic freedom, the truce. However, in the end, staying true to his oaths, Erwin has forsaken his dream of confirming his father's theory to secure humanity's survival and to continue giving meaning to the demise of his fallen comrades. The affirmation and resolve that Erwin gathered to commit to this decision is attributed to Levi's impassioned plea to steer Erwin in the right direction. Masked as an ultimatum then, sympathizing with Erwin and understanding the painful situation he was thrust into, Levi decided to share the weight of Erwin's responsibilities as the commander with him, ensuring that he did not betray the Servicorps' ideals and in effect besmirching the hearts his comrades surrendered towards this cause. In Levi's case, what is most critical to note is his personal desire to guarantee his comrade's survival, at least to the best of what was realistically possible to him, which is rooted in his past failure and inability to protect his companions Forlan and Isabel. I'm unsure whether Levi maintains a dream of his own or not, as he seems very grounded in reality, but as far as I am concerned, he most definitely retains a strong desire to protect his comrades and cherishes the bonds he formed with them. Nevertheless, once the decision had to be made, Levi abandoned his personal desire of ensuring his comrades' existence to safeguard humanity's collective survival, whilst upholding the core idealistic ideology of the Servicorps. As Erwin metaphorically entrusted Levi with the hearts dedicated toward this collective cause upon his death, any choice weighing the individual over the Servicorps' end goals would be considered as treason, since it would render the innumerable human sacrifices and casualties thus far null and void. As Erwin stated in an interaction previously regarding the specific moral dilemma, and I quote, "Is humanity perhaps more precious than any one life? I personally do not have an answer to this inquiry." In any case, due to Eren's eventual insurrection and the potential of him being relieved of his Titan powers by the military police brigade as a result of his rebellion, Levi begins to doubt and regret the decisions he made thus far. His choices now weighing heavily upon him, he reflects internally and is viscerally reminded that he allowed his comrades to perish in order to rescue Eren on numerous occasions, which he viewed as a beacon of hope for humanity then. I do not believe Levi despises Eren for this. I believe that he views Eren as a comrade who took took the wrong path and wishes to guide him, or to at least have him re-evaluate the route he chose, just as he did in the past with Erwin. This is why he explicitly did not agree to have Eren eaten, and of course I do think he viewed Eren with sentimentality and did not yet want to give up on him altogether, especially after surviving all the trials and tribulations up to this point with him. Nonetheless, Eren's initial declaration to give meaning to his deceased comrades who dared to venture outside of the walls and to not let their deaths be in vain, whether he is still factoring this or not in the finale, ironically led to him potentially invalidating their very existence and self-sacrifice, specifically due to the extreme methods and measures Eren committed to, at least from Levi's ideological standpoint. So this begs the question, how far is too far, and what should be sacrificed and what should not? Ultimately, Erwin and Levi relinquished that which was most personal and dearest to them, inclusive of their individualistic freedom, dreams, hopes and desires to pursue the achievement of the collective freedom of humanity and its continued survival, in accordance with the Servicorps Code of Conduct. Erwin abandoned his dream, while Levi sacrificed his comrades and closest companions to ensure that the objectives and ideals of the Servicorps are achieved and upheld. This is not to say that Erwin did not value his comrades, as he did choose to perish with them in the end to fulfill his duty and in memory of those who dedicated themselves to this relentless cause. And this is not to insinuate that Levi is devoid of feelings, quite the opposite, as it is evident throughout the story that all this is excruciatingly painful for him, yet he continues to endure this torment willingly. Contrarily to Erwin and Levi, Eren eventually decided upon his personal interpretation of freedom over the collective will of the Servicorps. Why? It could be simply due to a lack of intervention from his closest circle and his superiors. The influence of his inherited memories and his ability to peer into the future may have contorted his rationalization, or perhaps he was simply unable to neither sacrifice his comrades nor risk being deprived of his individualistic vision of freedom, no matter the cost. But I am willing to wager that his nature is the greatest factor in this equation. However, one aspect is certain: the narrative figuratively and literally cornered Eren, taxing him physically, emotionally, and mentally from the very beginning to the very end. As was Erwin and Levi to some degree, Eren did waver between taking a path which suited the individual over the collective, but we must not forget, Eren did for the majority of the story uphold and embrace the wishes of the collective, more specifically humanity within the wall. This is indicated a number of times throughout the story. For example, without Eren sealing the outer trust gate, humans within the walls might have suffered even more heavy losses. Without him agonizingly mastering hardening, they would not have sealed the wall Maria. Without him actively combating the Marleyan warriors, Annie, Reiner, and Bertolt, they would not have reached his father's basement to confirm the truth regarding their precarious situation. He even contemplated having Historia inherit his founding and attack Titan, which he determined at the time to be humanity's best chance in terms of continuity. To this end, one may assert that he indeed did uphold the principle of collectivism to some degree, but of course, his modus operandi became fragmented once he learns the truth and is confronted by the outside world. Humanity did exist past the walls, and they all harbored untold resentment and hatred towards him and his people. Suddenly, his main enemies are no longer mindless creatures, but rather intelligent, calculating humans. Moreover, the Titan infestation within Paradise was orchestrated by them. It was not a result of wild evolution. There was concrete meaning behind their suffering and oppression. Eren found himself ensnared in a zero-sum war, laced with severe moral and ethical repercussions. First, it was humanity versus the Titans, and then it was the descendants of the Titans versus humanity. It is not a novelty that many human lives were lost as a result of the Servicorps' collective pursuit of freedom. However, the difference now lies in Eren's approach, and more precisely, in the case of expeditions beyond the walls. Then, human life was not lost, but rather sacrificed. least from the perspective of the core members of the Servicorps, while Eren's pursuit of freedom actively involved the indiscriminate extermination of those who did not wish to die. And of course, that is not to say that Servicorps members did want to die, but rather that they were prepared to fall for this cause, theoretically speaking. And we must also not forget that the revolution which took place within the walls to overthrow the crown brought about the demise of many humans who clearly did not wish to perish. So what is dissimilar in the case of Eren then? Well, from my perspective at least, it is clearly because of the magnitude of his actions and how far he was willing to go, I would say. But then again, this is a subjective take, since divisions within the walls were clearly rooted. As many as those who disapproved of his ideology and actions existed, many who supported his cause were present as well, of course, without completely understanding what drove him to this point. I further assert that Eren inevitably took the path of individualism due to the singular fact that he did not factor in the hopes and demands of his people. This is applicable to the Servicorps, the Jaegers to some extent, his brother Zeke, and his closest companions Armin and Mikasa. Eren's pursuit of freedom was primarily tailored for him at that point. Yes, part of what pushed him to this point was to secure his people's continued survival, but it was still inconsistent with their collective will. In fact, most of the factions I highlighted did not wish for a massacre of genocidal proportions to secure their freedom, their continued existence. For those who wished for such an outcome, namely the Jaegerists, Eren even betrayed them to a certain extent. How? Simply because he did not use the full capacities of the Founding Titan's abilities. For instance, to alter his comrades' memories to a significant extent, taking full control of their bodies and so forth without ever confronting them. Surely that would have ensured the complete success of the rumbling. He actively allowed his personalized nature to jeopardize the very vision he enacted, for better or worse, all in order to be consistent with his individualistic hunger for freedom, which I contend took the form of anarchy, aligned with his maxims and restrictions, which seemed to even elude him. As we all witnessed, and based on my inference, the child persona of Eren illustrated seemingly embracing the heavens in jubilation upon reaching the horizons he sought for so long, fading into a somber expression as he calls for Armin to witness the scenery, betrays a sense of self-denial, but perhaps this is no more than a projection on my part. It is also quite difficult to ascertain whether he truly was disappointed that humanity existed past the walls or not. A part of me perceived this as a thinly veiled coping mechanism to deceive oneself to commit to an action that is inconsistent with one's morals and configurations. Perhaps just as Erwin deceived himself in the past to commit to unethical means and methods, Eren deceived himself to push on to a similar effect, no matter the price. But another part of me concedes and believes that this perhaps was the true personal, individualistic freedom he sought from the very beginning, that is, to eradicate any walls which obstructed his pursuit of freedom, sentient or not. Maybe it was a blend of both aspects, but still, why? Surely a genocide could have been circumvented. Was there not a better option? Did he not want to avoid this scenario? We may never know for certain, but I can vouch for one thing. At the heart of this character lies a deep-rooted trauma interwoven with a primal yearning which he acted upon until his very end. The price for freedom has always been quite steep historically to pay, regardless of its rendition, but it was at least assumed that Eren valued his freedom to a degree where he would not infringe upon the freedom of others, especially the vulnerable, of course, exclusive to those who would take away his freedom actively, including more specifically the Titans early on in the story. This has eventually changed throughout the series, drastically as I elaborated. This is not to say that Eren's actions are justified, but it is worthwhile to note herein, as it could allow us to have a better understanding of this complex character, whether it is in the subtext of freedom, dreams, hopes, desires, ideals, or realism. The divide between the realization of such constructs in conjunction with individualism or collectivism that the narrative built on is quite intriguing and full of depths. That is all. Until then.